वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्. All right. So the chapter 2 and the verse 29. Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidenam Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidenam Ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanyah. Ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanyah. Ascharyavat-chainamanyah shrunoti. Ascharyavat-chainamanyah shrunoti. Shrutvapyenam veda na chaiva kaschet. Shrutvapyenam veda na chaiva kaschet. One perceives the soul as a wonder. Some speak of it in amazement, while others hear of it in wonderment, while none knows it even after hearing of it. Ascharyavat. Okay. Ascharya means wonder. Okay. And tells about the self, the Atma. Here Bhagavan is discussing about Atma, the self. Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidenam. The knowledge of the wondrous self is not achieved through the senses. The self can be known by the self itself. It's beyond the realm of senses. We need to understand this nicely. But it says that self is not achieved through the senses. Okay. Senses, be it ears, eyes, okay, speeches, we can't know that. We can't attain that. And then what? It says the self can be known by the self itself. It's beyond the realm of senses. Very, very, very simple example if I have to tell you that. For an example, okay, in our room, we have the divo, the lit. We lighted already, the divo is there, right? Now to see the divo, you don't need another divo to see. That's a divo, isn't it? That's why it says to know Atma or the self, it can be only known through self, through itself. This is but a tricky thing, but since we have chosen this path, okay, to study, to more, right? These are the thing we have to try to understand. It takes little time, but we will. So what it says, the self can be known by the self itself, and that's why I told you to see the divo in the room which is giving the light. You don't need another divo to see. We know that that's a see. So as Bhagavan say, as I am, this knowledge requires no proof. Another example Bhagavan has given here, okay? I mean, how can you prove yourself? I mean, okay, I am Jaydev Bhai. Prove that I am Jaydev Bhai. What kind of proof I am going to get for you? Right? So at the most I'll say I breathe, that's why I am. Nothing else we can say about that. You got my point. So it's a knowledge for self. And the central idea or the sentence for the whole this particular verse, if you focus ourselves on the quote from Socrates, know thyself. But we almost decades and years together try to know others and don't try to ourselves. Very clearly, Socrates has mentioned, know thyself. We need to know ourselves. And once that is on track, the contact between the self and higher self is already established. But that's the first step. Know thyself. That is more important quote from Socrates. So, as I am, this knowledge requires no proof, no instrument. It is self-evident. That's I am. You can't come with any proofs. Its consciousness cannot be experienced as separate from I. Okay. This is intuited by the person himself. This is not a subject of senses and intellect. It's beyond that. It's beyond the senses. It's beyond the intellect. And that's why in the third chapter, I think it's second last verse, Yo buddhe paradastu saha. It's above that. Okay? Therefore, the knowledge of self is said to be a marvel. The term pashyati here in this word pashyati, the term pashyati has two meanings. To see with eyes, and the second is to know the self by one's own self. Here it has been used in the sense of knowing the self by one's own self. That has been mentioned again in the same chapter in 55th verse and in the chapter 6, the 20th verse also. Now, what exactly happens? Okay, in Sanskrit terms, they are normally used that drashta, drashti, and drashya. I'm going to explain these things in English. Okay, it's exactly discussed here in this commentary, that when what normally happens when one sees with one's eyes, three things are necessary. Okay, number one, the onlooker, which is in Sanskrit drashta. Second, the object to be seen. And third, sight, the power to see. Okay, right. Here, for an example, I want to see all of you. That means the object is there through the computer, through the laptop. Okay, right. But that itself is not enough. I need the drashti, right? Drashti, that's the vision. I need the eye, the power to see. And the third is drashta, the onlooker. If I am not there, even if this computer is there, I won't be able to see. So what it says there, when one sees with one's eyes, okay, there are three things necessary: the onlooker, the object to be seen, and sight, the power to see. But while knowing the self, these three are not necessary. Because to see the self with self, okay, this cannot be perceived by senses. This cannot be perceived by mind. This cannot be perceived by intellect, but by one's own self. Okay. When we want to search for a thing in a dark room, we need eyesight as well as light. But if there is light lamp, there is no need for another lamp, as I told you earlier, to see the lamp which is lit already. Similarly, there is no need for other means to perceive the self. Self is self, okay? The self has its own light by which it can be lit and known, okay? In the same context, I am going to take you to the Kenopanishad, okay? It has very good description of Brahma. So Brahma is look, for our understanding, we can use the word Paramatma, and we Atma, right? Okay. So it's very good example in Kenopanishad. The Rishi has given Srotrasya Srotram Manaso Manoyat Vacho hi vacham sa upa pranasya pranah चक्षुष चक्षुर अधिमुच्च धीरा prityasmalokaadamruta bhavanti. What it says? That which is hearing of our hearing. Srotrasya srotrah. That which is hearing of our hearing. Mind of our mind. Speech of our speech. That too is life of our life. Breath and sight of our sight. The wise are released beyond and they pass from this world and become immortal. Okay. So, Srotrasya Srotram, that which is hearing of our hearing. He who is the ear of the ear, means who gives to the ear the power of hearing. Srotrasya Srotram. He Who is the ear of the ear means who gives to the ear the power of hearing. Who is the mind of the mind means who gives to the mind the power of thinking. Who is the speech of speech, who gives to the speech the power of speaking. Is verily the life of the first life, who gives the power of life to the first prana. The ear of ear, who gives the ear the power of hearing. The wise whose mind is under control, having known the Bhagavan thus and realized him, leave their final body through Suksmanadi. Okay. So that we need to understand. Okay. The eyes cannot see it. It is what makes the eyes see. Okay. Chakshus chakshuhu, srotrasya srotram. Not that which the eye can see, but that whereby the eye can see, know that to be Brahman, the eternal, and not what people here adore. Not that which the ear can hear, but that whereby the ear can hear. Know that to be the Brahman of the eternal and not what people here adore. So, this very nicely described in Kenopanishad. So that power is the self. Okay, when we want to search, then as we have discussed this example of lamp, the lamp is there, is little ready. So we don't need anything else. Now, it says about the three kinds of body. A body of three kinds: physical, what we call the gross body, subtle, and the causal body. The body which is nourished by food and water for its growth is known as physical or the gross body. This gross body is the object of senses. Okay. The subtle body consists of 17 elements. Yeah, that what we call in terms Panchagnanendriya, Panchakarmendriya. Here it is translated as 5 senses, 5 organ of action. Organ of action is Karmendriya. 5 vital airs, that's pran. Pran, apan, saman, udan, that's a pran. Okay. So those are 15, and the 16th is the mind, and 17th is the intellect. So the subtle body consists of 17 elements. The subtle body can be perceived by intellect and not by the senses. The latencies, vasana, form the causal body. Then what forms the causal body? The vasana. Here it is translated as latencies, Latencies. Okay. That form the causal body. If we reflect on the three kinds of bodies, it is evident that the gross body is not the self, as it changes every moment. And it is an object of knowledge. Similar is the case with the subtle body. The causal body is an evolute of nature, but the self is beyond nature. Therefore, the causal body is also not the self. As far as the knowledge of the self is concerned, it is beyond them, and this knowledge is marvelous. Ascharyavat pashyati. This is when Ascharyavat pashyati, when the soul ceases its identification with the body, it knows itself, and therefore it has been said that one perceives the soul as a wonder. Ascharyavat pashyati, Ascharya, wonder. Okay. Here in these verse, as well as in the, of course, in the third verse in the 17th chapter also, okay, Bhagavan Krishna has used the term kaschid. Someone knows me in reality, right? The verse, the another verse is also there. Manusyanam sahasretu kaschid. Yeah. So someone knows me in reality. It means that it is very difficult to know the imperishable. But actually, it's not so. The fact is that it seems difficult only because there are a few aspirants who sincerely want to know the soul. You don't try. Because we took it granted. It's like a, I mean, that words, the poem in English, Solomon Grundy, born on Monday. Yeah, so that is life. And berries on Sunday. That's life. So the Solomon never tried to think about that. Who am I? You got my point. So it's it's maybe you can put in that category. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. We need to engage ourselves at least by this. At least by this Geeta class, we are trying. We are trying. It can be in that long walk. It might be a 1 centimeter, but it's still the 1 centimeter. It's still the 1 centimeter. Because what we call always, 1 rand is still the 1 rand. Yeah. Because when one has the 99 rand, if you put one, then only it will make the 100 rand. Otherwise not. So only it seems difficult only because there are a few aspirants. As I told you, we don't try. He took it granted. Ahman, Magan Bhai born and died. Chagan Bhai also born and died. So we are putting ourselves in the same category. Same category. Ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanyah. Other persons speak to of it as marvelous because it's beyond the reach of words, beyond the reach of speech, speech illumined by the self. Then how can it describe the illuminator? The great souls who speak of it can just give a kind of hymn to draw the attention of the listeners. He, I mean, will give us but guideline, but we still have to walk on that path. And that's why in the Vedic terms, there is a very good phrase, neti, neti. So Rushi says, we don't know. I mean, that's a loose translation I have done for you, right? Okay. So we have to, if somebody can come to us and describe, for an example, the Cape Town or the Cape Agalas, okay, he will describe. He can draw the picture. He will make you the term, okay? But to see, to experience, we have to go there. Otherwise, it will be his experience and not mine, not ours. Okay? That's most important thing. Otherwise, the people will say that I have shared this. I do not want to touch this sensitive subject. People will say, hey, that's our Guru's realization day. That not to be celebrated. Well, keep it to the Guru. But they celebrate realization day, self-realization. For him. What did you do? Anyway, so we need to understand this. All right? Okay? Here the term anya has been used to emphasize the fact that only a few liberated souls who possess metaphysical knowledge can explain it fully to an aspirant and enable him to attain the imperishable. All do not possess the ability to remove his doubts and give satisfactory answer to his argument. So those who have attained that, those who have achieved that stage will can make us more clear, right? But still, we need to go. We need to travel on that path, right? Ascharyavat anya shrunoti. Other persons hear of it as marvelous. Listening to scriptures and advice of other words is quite different from voice of the soul. I repeat, other persons hear of it as marvelous. Listening to scripture and advice of the other world is quite different from the voice of the soul. That voice we should seek for. It means that this soul is something marvelous and uncommon and is beyond the reach of senses, beyond the reach of mind, beyond the reach of intellect. It eliminates these. Here the term anyah has been used to explain the fact that the person who hears is different from the one who knows, and from other who is capable of explaining it to an aspirant in such a manner that its full nature is revealed to him. Furthermore, what it says, Srutva pyenam vedana chaiva kaschit. Srutva api enam. There are some who do not know it even on hearing. It means that merely hearing will not help one to know it. On hearing, when one gets established in one's own self, one will know one's own self by oneself. Okay, let's take the practical or worldly example. Okay, wedding season, right? Okay, and you went for the wedding, to attend the wedding. Then you had your lunch or supper or whatever it is, and there was a Sikhand. The correct word is Shrikhand, but we say Sikhand. Shrikhand, right? Okay. You ate, you tasted. At the most, you'll describe, you'll share your experience. But the joy which you got having that second, another person will not. Another person will not. Because for that, he has to eat that second. Similarly, it says here, so merely hearing will not help one to know it. On hearing, when one gets established, so one person himself eat the second on its own, okay? Then only. Right. Now a question arises that an aspirant, on hearing the words of scriptures and preceptor, gets knowledge. Why has it been said then that there are some who do not know it, even of hearing of it? Yes, just mere hearing will not help. Okay, and I use this quote very often in our different classes. Gnanam bhara kriya vihinam. Gnan, knowledge. Bhar, burden. Kriya, action. So I mean, nowadays, with the information highway, okay, what we call IT, okay, there are plenty, all the information, right? But that's not the knowledge. Well, let's consider that's knowledge, okay, for an example. But if it is not in practice, then it's just we are carrying the burden. Okay. So gnanam bhar kriya vihina, actionless knowledge. If it is not transformed in action, if it is not translated in action, knowledge is fine. That's the burden. Okay. If we read the knowledge, so the novel is one thing. But when we study the scripture, for that I'm not using the word reading the scripture, okay? Because if you study that, if not today, tomorrow, it will inspire us to put something in practice. Otherwise, mere just reading and put it, okay. Then we can say, no, but I have 1,000 books in my library. It's fine. It might impress your guests or your relatives or your friends. I have to visit so many houses as per my job, okay? And in the showcase there are so many books. But how many of them they read it, they study it, and they try to put in practice? Very few, very few. So, gnanam bhara kriya vihinam. So, even on hearing of it, it's not good. It's not that much, but we have to put in practice. The answer is that it is the aspirant himself who, by having faith in the words of scriptures and preceptors, gains knowledge when you put in practice. Otherwise, there have been several incarnations of God, and there also have been liberated souls who held discourses on metaphysics, and by hearing their discourse, the people should have gained metaphysical knowledge. But actually, it has not happened. Yeah, there are plenty discourses. I mean, just take the practical example with the technology. Everything is on our fingertip. Just use the YouTube and just use the Google. Swami Googleanand. Swami Googleanand. You get everything. Get everything. Even on YouTube, right? Okay. You can get the kachro and then you can get the highest knowledge. Now you know that when I say you, means we, okay? We can get everything. But how many of us have improved ourselves? Handful? 1%? Half percent? So it's there. It's there. But as I told you earlier, if it is not in practice, if it is not transformed, if it is not translated in the action, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, just take the practical example. We might have watched on the YouTube, okay, the breathing exercise, for an example, will keep you fit. Are we doing that? Take the practical example, right? Don't go for the spiritual development or the spiritual progress. This is a practical, which is in our day-to-day life. Or to gain the weight or to lose the weight, there are exercise, or these are the guideline. Are we doing that? When we are just browsing on the YouTube, we just found and just click, and then we found that it's too long video, 12 minutes rather here and there. next, next. And the same thing we are doing for the scripture also. This great man's commentary, that great man's commentary, this Swami, that Swami, and those all books are on the shelving. At least in South Africa, I can guarantee that it's not collecting the dust because we regularly clean it on the regular interval. Otherwise, I would have used the word collecting the dust. Nothing else. Nothing else. So, but it has not happened. Their discourse can be helpful to a striver having faith. When we use the word faith, means to put in practice. But he will also have to get himself established in his own self. To get himself established in the own self means, again, it's a matter of practicing. This expression does not mean to convey that knowledge of the self is impossible. No, it's not impossible. It rather conveys that it is beyond the senses, however hard efforts by a man may make him to know it. Ultimately, he will have to know himself by his own self. And that most appealing verse in, I think in the chapter 6, Bhagavan says, Uddhared atmanatmanam natmanam avsadayat. You going to help yourself, nobody else. But we are always looking for the conveniency, and that's why the moment we have noticed person with the orange robe, bow down. He is going to liberate us. If that is the true, then why Bhagavan Krishna told to Arjuna, Uddhared Atmana Atmanam, you have to liberate yourself. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Bhagavan Krishna has not given any guarantee to Arjuna. Forget about ourselves. Forget about the rest of the world. But Arjuna was right in front of Bhagavan Krishna. Not told that. Uddhared Atmanam Atmanam avsadayat. You have to liberate yourself. But we, all the shortcut, easy plan. Okay. Maybe he will. Maybe he is a knowledgeable. Okay, maybe he is knowledgeable, but that knowledge for himself is not going to help us if we don't put in practice. Yeah, of course, he can guide us. He can show the path. he can inspire us to walk on that path. But who is going to walk? We have to walk. We have to walk. We have to walk. Nobody else is going to do that. Okay? If I need to enjoy the delicious chicken, I have to eat it. Okay? Somebody else will be eating, and I can't have that, the joy in my life. So, we need to put in practice. So a man may makes him to know it. Ultimately, he will have to know himself by his own self. Right. Now, what is knowing of the self? By the self. The question is, what is knowing of the self by the self? There is a difference between doing, perceiving, and knowing. Doing involves organs of action. Perceiving involves senses, while knowing is done by self itself. Okay. Doing, to put, okay. For an example, we need to do mala, 20 mala, 11 mala, 15 mala. Then we engage ourselves, okay, with the actions, right? But then, finally, while knowing is done by the self itself. So these are the stages. The senses actually do not know, rather, they only perceive which is useful in the daily activity. The knowledge of knowing oneself by one's own self is of two kinds. How that's? One, I am different from the body, I am different from the world. And secondly, I have identity with God. Again, in the beginning, I told you to establish the connection between Atma and Paramatma. So, I am different from the body, I am different from the world. And secondly, I have identity with God. That's my real identity. That's my true identity. Not the identity with my house, with my business, with my shops, with my small empire. In other words, it can be said, I have no affinity with the kaleidoscopic or perishable world, while I have constant affinity with unchangeable, imperishable God. After possessing this kind of knowledge, one can know the soul in reality. This knowledge is beyond the reach of speech and intellect. Okay? I think there is little to be discussed, but maybe next week we're going to conclude here. Okay? Again, to achieve this, as we started with know thyself, but that power is also going to be granted by Almighty. And for that, again, we have to take the route, what? Through Arjun. And that's why our concluding prayer is 73rd verse of 18th chapter, followed by the Arti. In today's talk, today's discussion, whatever you like, whatever you enjoy, credit goes to all the saintly people, all the great men, all the scripture, whatever I have studied, I have read, I have heard, absolutely nothing belongs to me. So I cannot take the credit. And as you know, and I always mention that our main reference book for our Geeta class is Swami Ram Sukdas Ji's Sadhak Sanjivani. So we will recite the 73rd verse of 18th chapter. Nashto moha smrutiralabdha त्वत्प्रसादान्मयाच्युत स्थितोऽस्मि गतसन्देहः करिष्ये वचनं तव।